Now, why do we watch Power Rangers? I think everyone will agree that we watch it for the fight, choreography, action, and the cool special powers. We've had hundreds and hundreds of Power Rangers throughout the decades. I always wanted to look at who was the best fighter. Now, the problem with that is it's kind of hard to do because on top of it, it's so many actors, and at the beginning of the series with MMPR, they originally hired people who could do the fight scenes. They were either gymnasts, excellent, karate fighters themselves, but then the reverse happened where it was mainly focusing on acting. That doesn't mean they'll be bad at fighting. An actor can do really good, choreography and pull off, those important moments of, being a fighting character. Ravi. Now, it was pretty hard to figure out what later PR season has a really good fighting character because as the years went along, we had less and less civilian fights. I don't just count, the Rangers fighting in suit because of two dumb reasons. One was the production team admitted, we don't really fight civilian fights anymore because it's easier and much more quicker to film the actors act and the Power Ranger suit performers to do their main stunts. So you have two things going on at the same time, saves time to film one episode. The other reason is because other countries, when they aired Power Rangers, civilian fights were heavily cut down, which is so bizarre to me when Power Rangers itself is already very restrictive in the sense of they don't want to show a lot of things in a kid's show. So I ended up picking Ravi. He's the one who showed the most effort during his fight scenes. Even though Devin showed that he could fight, he had learned and did stuff in the pilot episode. Ravi was more of, I would say, the one that was willing to do more flips, kicks, while Devin and Zoe were more showcased of the hand-to-hand combat, more stationary, more close-ups. I prefer to have a mixture of everything. The stunt performer, the actors doing really cool things. And again, when it comes to Power Rangers, more so than other superhero shows, you love seeing the more impressive martial arts. Flipping around, turning around, grabbing people and using them as weapons. Those are the things that I also gauge. And Ravi was the more of the active participant in the fights and would use anything around him in order to deal with the enemies. Andros. Now, this was kind of surprising. At first, I didn't want to put Andros on the list because I said, well, Andros, he's the guy who loves using his weapons to fight. But then I remembered, you know what? Andros is not really a bad fighter. He fought Ecliptor many, many times, and especially during the more complicated fights, like when Andros was forced to fight Ecliptor in that enclosed space where Zordon's tube was. One of the more impressive things that people tend to forget about Andros is his fight during Forever Red. Yes, he was mainly using his weapon, but he was doing a lot of Matrix moves using that weapon. So I really loved and enjoyed those moments with Andros. So yeah, he started out a little weak, but he got really progressively better through the season. Kira. Now, I was trying to think of the seasons where they had their superpowers. Who was actually pretty unique with their superpowers? And then it came to me that Kira was actually pretty cool. Yeah, she has the shrieking, attack that knocks everyone down, but she also uses that to increase her agility. So she's loves jumping around, avoiding things, getting monsters to crash into each other. I always prefer Rangers when they do aerial attacks because it's more interesting. And monsters usually have abilities that give them an edge over Rangers. Some monsters can photocopy Rangers, and you can have a duplicate. You're stuck fighting your duplicate. Other ones where they electric shock you. A lot of monsters have long range attacks or giant speakers that act much like Kira's abilities. So when a Ranger has the ability to do things back at them from long range, I appreciate it more. Magna Defender. Now, I think the Magna Defender was a no-brainer. I'm talking about the original Magna Defender because even though I like Mike had a much reduced fighting style. He preferred using mainly the weapons. While the Magna Defender, he took on monsters with no real issue. He was also, pretty intelligent in the way he did things. He wouldn't fall for a lot of stupid nonsense, and as well as also he anticipated Leo's reaction to certain things, and he took advantage of that too. Oh, this would, push a button on Leo or Kai. I'll take advantage of that to look for the lights. Not to mention also he would use the monster of the week to distract the Ranger while he was looking for the lights. And not to mention, you have to also think about Magna Defender when he's in his Zord, because he's the one who's directly fighting in the Zord rather than them being in cockpits. So, not only does he fight on ground, he fights big. Zack. Now, Zack, he's a very unique character, and I'm surprised, 30 years, and they never copied his style really again. He's combined, dance moves and his physicality in order to an attack. And I love that because it gives him a one-up on strategy. Because as a dancer, you have to anticipate your partner when you're doing things. Like, will they actually move around or turn around, or they want me to spin them around? Things like that, or lift them up into the air. Anticipate and figure out what's the best course of action. Not only that, he always puts in quips to even distract monsters. Imagine Zack fighting Babu. The first thing he would do is insult him and then completely distract him of what his goal was supposed to be, and then get him out of the way. And it also spilled into him being second in command of the Power Rangers team. Because of all those extra skills that he had, he was always there to take charge. Nick. A lot of problems that happen in Mystic Force. Even though you were hired to be an actor and not really a fighter, if you put your mind to it and dedicate that moment where he's like, you know what, I want to look really good on camera. And Nick was that in the Dark Wish saga, where the world has ended. They don't have their powers. All their friends and family and people that they knew from the beginning of the season are in danger of being killed. And you got Gingy captured on top of it, like failure upon failure upon failure. I would feel like total crap after all that happened. And then I could understand where Nick was like, you know what? I'm going to stop these guys as hard as I can, with or without their powers. And, I'm going to give credit to all the Rangers, but Nick was the one who did it the most. He fought as far as he can, as hard as he could, to prove his point that he was still worthy of being a Ranger. Tommy. Now, Tommy, obviously, Jason David Frank has an advantage because he himself is a great fighter alone. He can do a lot of the moves that the stunt performers normally take place, so you can actually see him on camera doing these moves. He did moves that were like, what? Like, one you never knew that were even possible, but then became a staple of his own abilities. Tommy really loved, doing, spin kicks in the air, and also probably his famous move, his ass attack that everyone always brings up. So he had really iconic abilities, and I think also what sold Tommy more on his fighting style is his kiaing. Tommy's was the one who's most recognized because he did it really over the top. Find something of the character that works with it and use it, and would project that strength onto his fighting style. I was like, oh, you're gonna fight Tommy right now? You are screwed. Adam. I think Adam was like Tommy. They both share very similar styles. They will use a kick rather than a punch. But I think what made Adam more different from Tommy is that he kind of did things more subtle. While Tommy was out there with his abilities and his ass attacks and his kiaing, Adam was quiet. He would do it for the people in front of him, and you wouldn't even realize he would take down 4 Padronatrons. He was more careful. The Rangers in general pay attention. They don't want to injure their friends or, put civilians in danger. But Adam, I think, was the one who took extra precautions. Get it done as fast as possible, and that's what I appreciated about Adam's character. He just wanted the fight over and done with as fast as possible because it reduces damage, it reduces any risk to anyone being in the area. Eric. Here comes the opposite, Eric. Now, Eric, obviously that came from his detest of him being used or, being ignored. He didn't have a great life, he didn't have a lot of money, and he despised rich people. A lot of them are stuck up, they don't really care about the average person in the world. That hatred of that want of power drew him to gain that power. And I think that's what I loved about Eric. Whenever he kicked or punched, he put everything into him. He didn't have the most unique fighting style, but I did like his ability to combine weapons and martial arts together. I think when also as a ranger, it enhanced him too, because you have this AI computer that can aid him, that elevates him even further. So it made him very deadly, and that's why I consider him more so as a better fighter overall compared to Tommy and Adam. Chad. But Chad beats everyone, and that's because I think he embodies every Power Ranger out there. Not only does he fight really hard, he fights with grace. He also tries to understand the styles of the monster or the people fighting him. What are they doing? How do I counteract it? But also he uses his team to his advantage. Just like how in that time Chad and Joel were fighting the monsters isolated, they worked with each other in tandem. Joel jumped in, like, okay, this gives me a chance to get back up, get a couple of kicks in, morph, and then continue the fight while they swap back and forth between each other. Not to mention, he's also a teacher himself. You know, he learned from a really great sensei, and he passed it on to people, including like even Kelsey. Because remember, Kelsey, she was a great fighter, and Chad was like, you know, I can help you in this area. So you could fill in the gaps of like, you know, Chad's probably the one who's been teaching all of them. There's hundreds and hundreds of Power Ranger characters. I think what makes the best fight is a combination of everyone working together. But the fighting is the second most important thing out of Power Rangers. If you have a crappy choreographer or an actor who just really is unfamiliar with doing things, it does show. Ultimately, what you want is that connection and that payoff between both sides of the character. Just because I love them being in their spandex suits, but I also want to know that the character is behind that helmet fighting to save the world. Even though I don't really care for the later seasons that lack the civilian fights, Power Rangers does have distinct fighting styles that they went through. Some more physical. Other seasons prefer jumping in the air, kicking in the air, explosions going off, things like that. If you have a suggestion or a topic you'd like me to do, leave a comment down below and I may use it in next week's video.